Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 2 of Homiletics class. This week we're going to be starting the book, the Handbook of Contemporary Preaching. It should be a red book on there. I have actually had this book since I took the class from Dr. Sam way back in 1999, maybe 2000, somewhere in there, whenever I took this class there at Family of Faith. But anyway, this is the Handbook for Contemporary Preaching. It was published in 1982, so contemporary is kind of a loose term, but hey, I guess it's more contemporary than 100 years ago. But anyway, even within this book, there are some really good things. We're going to be going through the first section, which is chapters 1 through 4 of this book. So make sure and read that. It gives a lot of great insight to the history of preaching, why we preach. Is it just tradition, or is it something that the Bible actually commands us to do? Within all that, I have a feeling that probably most of us will actually learn something, about the history of preaching that we probably did not know before. And then chapter 2 talks about the preaching within a historical perspective, so it talks about the, starting back with the early church and going on, up through Augustine, and then using other people throughout, from history as well, using about their different, just preaching and what they did, and all the way through some of the Great Awakening and the Second Great Awakening and things like that. So, it is a really great thing in there. Chapter 3 is the preaching tradition in America, and it goes through, from the New World, and then it goes through, from how preachers really kind of help set the foundation for things as they move forward after the Civil War, after the Revolutionary War, and then and beyond, and then throughout the Civil War, how preachers played such a incredible role within that, and so it's a very interesting history of it. It isn't exactly the most exciting reading in the world, but if you are a student of history or just enjoy history, like I do, then it is something that is really good. And then chapter 4 talks about the literature of preaching. And, it says, like different kinds of literature to avoid, maybe, putting into your sermons whenever you're doing things, as well as, then using classical literature and all that kind of stuff, and kind of the nuance of that, and the do's and don'ts, and, and some of it, is maybe a little bit, some of it is definitely maybe a little bit more dogmatic than maybe what it should be, but this is this author's preference, and and there are some things in there that are absolutely true. You never want to use literature that does not agree with the Bible. That's just not a good practice at all. So within that, you definitely want to make sure that any references you are making to literature, that it does agree with the Bible, and trying not to take things out of context, and really making sure, that we're doing things contextually correct. That is one of the biggest problems that we have, and honestly, and even for me personally, as I have been growing as a preacher throughout, the last 20 years or so, one of the big issues that I would have is that I would take one verse, that I thought was great, and it was something that God was speaking to me, and I would make an entire sermon on that, and sometimes it was right, and it worked out well. Other times it was completely out of context, and I didn't even realize it because I didn't take the time to actually read into context, and context is very important. As we see in the news today, as we see everywhere throughout the world today, that, you can take one pull quote from anything, from any political leader, from any world leader, from any pastor, from, your wife or your husband or your kids, and you can make that certain quote try to fit whatever narrative you already have going in your mind. And so, we need to be very careful about that, because context always matters. And so that is something, to think about as we are growing within our development as preachers, and as we are just growing into these things. Also this week, if you wouldn't mind, we're also going to be reading chapters 5 through 10 of Communicating for a Change. Those are going to be, your discussion question is actually based out of one of the chapters of those books, of that book. And so So, make sure and just go through that and read those things. And whenever you are answering these discussion questions, just remember there is not a wrong answer. It's okay. I mean, you may have a little bit of an unorthodox view of one of those things within the discussion group, and that's all right. I mean, we all have different opinions, and I love the fact that whenever we can actually have a difference of opinion, and still be able to respect and love one another, in the love of Christ, even throughout those things. Even if maybe we don't necessarily agree, or maybe I see something differently than you do. The one thing that I would ask is that you would just kind of back up your opinion, whether it's through scripture, whether it's through personal experience, something, not just say, well, because so-and-so told me this is what I've always believed. Now, and that might be the case, and that is very legitimate, because, there are several things that I have even grown as a minister over the years, where I did certain things for a certain way for a certain amount of time because it's just the way I was taught to do them, and then going to find out that the reason why the other person who I learned it from did it is because that's just the way that they did it, and so we always need to be growing as people. We need to be growing as communicators. We need to be growing as those who are really attempting to further our styles, and somebody who's really growing into everything that God has called us to do. I don't just kind of want to tap out here and say, man, I've reached a plateau and I'm comfortable and I like it. I don't just want to do that. I want to say, okay, God, what's next? And what's next? I want to appreciate everything He has shown me so far, and I want to stay here, but I'm always wanting to say, okay, God, I want to learn the next thing that you have for me to learn. I want to be able to step into the next thing that you have for me to step into. So, as we're learning about the little bit of the history of preaching and why we do it, and some of the do's and don'ts of using certain things within us to help us preach, let's really kind of ask ourselves those questions and really be honest enough with ourselves to say, okay, do I do this? Have I thought about doing this? Is this good or is it bad? And be honest enough with yourself in that. And that's okay. It's good for us to be able to recognize our shortcomings so that we can become a better representation of who Christ has called us to be. So, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You can text me, you can call me, you can email me, any of the things that are there online, and you should be able to see all those within the class. So I hope that everybody is doing well, and we will talk to you soon.